Well, roughly 1 million people have now been forced from their homes in Lebanon as fighting between Israeli and Hezbollah forces escalates. But while Lebanese citizens escaping the violence are being welcomed in neighboring Syria, the situation is very different for Syrian refugees who have been living in Lebanon for more than a decade. Many are already living in refugee camps after fleeing the civil war back home. For them, returning to Syria is much more complicated. Joining us this morning to explain the situation on the ground and the risks is Yvonne Su. She's the director of the Center for Refugee Studies at York University. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this really important topic.
Well, it was heartbreaking as we were, taking a look at some of what's happening on the ground in Lebanon to know this particular case. There are about 1.5 million Syrians that currently live in Lebanon, and a lot of them, we said, are in refugee camps, which means they're living in tents and they're lacking even the most basic of necessities. We're talking healthcare, sometimes access to food. Food insecurity is a really serious issue there. Tell us about their particular situation and what it's like for them now.
Well, it's really challenging because they've been displaced for a very long time, like you said, more than 10 years. And in Lebanon, while they have been quite welcoming initially, as many neighbors do, and Lebanon is a refugee receiving country, and it's one of the places has the most refugees per capita. There's about 5.5 million Lebanese, and there's, like you said, 1.5 Syrian refugees. So they've accepted a lot. And as you can imagine, that leads to conflict, and that leads to tension regarding where food, resources, investments from the government should go. So as a result, the UNHCR has been doing a significant amount of providing of aid and protection for Syrians. But as the situation intensifies and as there is this invasion, things have just gotten way worse.
Syrian refugees say that despite the risk, they would actually rather stay in Lebanon than return back to Syria. What happens if they try to go back?
So it's really challenging because many of them left and they're refugees because they have a well-founded fear of persecution if they were to stay or return to Syria. Many of them oppose the regime and have left as a result, and they feel that the government knows about them, has ID'd them, and they're well aware that the Syrian intelligence services are very capable. So Human Rights Watch has documented cases of people who have returned and have been killed, who have been disappeared, whose lives are in danger once they return. So there's a very serious threat to anybody who is going to return after they've crossed the border, become refugees, have been displaced for a while, and are known to oppose the regime.
The Syrian civil war is ongoing, and then you remember back in 2023 in February, there was the earthquake that worsened the crisis because it flattened so much of the infrastructure. So people there are facing hunger, they're facing a lack of health care. Can Syria manage refugees that are now flooding across the border?
Arguably, no. Right? Because of the ongoing civil war, because of so many distractions and places that are uninhabitable as a result of the earthquake or just challenging to live in, they can't really host them. But in this situation, they don't have a choice, right? There's nowhere. Lebanon's a really small country. There aren't many places for people to go once the invasion starts, and there's the sea.
So then tell me what happens on the ground. So we understand that schools are closed. Those have been turned into shelters. Some people are going to try and find safety at hospitals. But where do people who've been living in a refugee camp, who've been told that they have to leave because of war, where do they go? Where are they going?
Well, many of them want to stay. So that's a challenge. Many of them want to stay. They don't want to go back to Syria. And if they have to go back to Syria, UNHCR has set up several checkpoints. There is and are resources provided, but it's lacking. So we really do need to be donating to UNHCR, other organizations, and doing what we can to support them. But it's a very challenging situation overall.
Are they moving from one camp like setting to another?
I think it's very hard because they just don't want to be leaving.
Right.
So once they kind of start mobilizing, they're displaced again. And if they move from their camp to another camp to possibly other places, they just keep being on the go. So it's a very challenging situation. There's a lot of factors that they have to consider. And of course, all of this is extremely traumatic. To be displaced and displaced and displaced and then not able to stay in your host state, not able to return to your home state. It's a really difficult time.
And we're talking about young people and families, elderly people as well. The UN's Refugee Agency is working. They're trying to raise $425 million for some humanitarian assistance for people who are displaced in Lebanon. What aid is there for Syrian refugees?
I think the aid might not be so segregated because right now they're just going to be dealing with whoever is going to cross the border or is displaced. So I don't think it's separated all those lines. A lot of times there aren't even enough documentation for Syrian refugees because once they crossed over Lebanon, to a certain extent, Lebanon stopped documenting documenting them, stopped taking asylum claims because it was too overwhelming. So a lot of the Syrians are actually undocumented in this way, which also makes it challenging for them to travel in formal
I was going to say, you can't
ways.
cross the border if you're an undocumented person. Yvonne Su, it is a desperate situation. I want to thank you for coming on and highlighting it for people.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for covering it.
Still ahead on your morning.